HOA gave me 24 hours to remove my ranch, so I bought their clubhouse and raised rent 10x. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today's story is filled with unexpected twists, powerful emotions, and a shocking truth that no one saw coming. What begins as an ordinary situation will quickly turn into a dramatic confrontation, forcing the characters to make choices that could change their lives forever. Make sure you stay with us until the very end, because the final outcome may completely surprise you. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our latest stories. Your support helps us continue creating more emotional, meaningful, and unforgettable videos for you. We would also love to hear from you. What time is it where you are watching right now, and which city or country are you watching from? Please share your answer in the comments below. It is always wonderful to see viewers joining us from different parts of the world. Thank you for being here. Now, let us begin today's story. You have 24 hours to make this ranch disappear. Lorraine Pembroke said it at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, standing outside my front gate while a hydraulic post driver hammered an orange stake into the rain-softened ground. The impact rang across Whitaker Ridge like a warning bell. Fresh red paint shone on the sign bolted to the stake, "Remove all livestock and structures within 24 hours. Diesel fumes mixed with wet soil, cattle feed, and the sharp metallic smell that comes before a Texas storm." Lorraine wore a cream-colored coat, pearl earrings, and polished boots that had never crossed a muddy pasture unless a camera was watching. Russell Crane stood beside her holding a leather folder against his chest. Two men from a private compliance company waited near their truck, while a county employee remained inside his vehicle with both hands on the steering wheel. I looked at my phone. 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 41 seconds remained. Behind me, 83 cattle grazed in the lower field near the creek. Beyond them stood the red barn my father built, the north well he drilled, and 126 acres my grandfather bought in 1958. Lorraine glanced over my shoulder as if she were already deciding where the new road would go. "Silver Crest Preserve has secured emergency review of the Eastern Development Corridor," she said. "Your livestock operation is interfering with community expansion, environmental safety, and approved land use." She pushed the folder through the gate. The first page displayed the Silver Crest seal, 3 county reference numbers, and a signature that looked almost like my father's. Almost. My father pressed hard when he signed his name. His pen left grooves deep enough to feel from the back of the page. This signature rested on the paper without weight, like somebody had assembled it from a photograph. Thunder rolled beyond the ridge. The cattle lifted their heads together. The creek was still inside its banks, but the water already carried the dark smell of upstream rain. Lorraine knew the lower pasture would flood first. She also knew the eastern service lane was the safest route to higher ground. That was why her notice claimed control of it. She was not giving me a day to move a ranch. She was giving the storm time to make me desperate. My phone vibrated. A message from my sister Mara appeared beneath the countdown. "Do not sign anything. Dad terminated their lease 3 years ago." I read it twice, then slipped the phone into my jacket. Lorraine tapped one polished fingernail against the steel gate. "Do we understand each other, Mr. Whitaker?" I folded the notice slowly and placed it inside my coat. Across the eastern pasture, the Silver Crest clubhouse glowed beneath warm lights, its stone walls rising from a narrow strip of land my father had marked differently on every survey map he owned. A brass key still hung in his workshop beneath that map. For years, I had never found the lock it opened. "We understand each other," I said. Lorraine smiled toward the men behind her. "Good. By this time tomorrow, your cattle, equipment, and structures must be removed." Wind pushed the first hard sheet of rain across the gate, rattling the orange sign on its new post. I looked past her at the illuminated clubhouse, then back into her confident blue eyes. "Before tomorrow evening," I said, "you should find out who owns the ground beneath your boardroom." Her smile held for 1 second too long. Then it vanished. My countdown showed 23 hours and 56 minutes. Lorraine had arrived to erase Whitaker Ridge. Instead, she had started the clock on everything Silver Crest thought it owned. The rain followed me from the gate to the workshop, striking the roof in hard, uneven bursts and turning the ranch road into dark Texas mud. I left Lorraine's notice on my father's old workbench without opening the remaining pages. The cattle mattered first. 83 head stood in the lower pasture near the creek, their backs shining beneath the storm light. The water had not crossed the bank yet, but I could hear it moving faster through the cottonwoods. That sound had been part of Whitaker Ridge longer than I had. My grandfather bought the first 40 acres in 1958 with money he earned repairing combines and hauling feed across 3 counties. He started with a weathered farmhouse, 7 cattle, and a tractor that needed oil every morning. My father expanded the ranch one parcel at a time until it reached 126 acres. He built the red barn, drilled the north well, and cut the eastern service lane through a strip of land most people considered too narrow to matter. He never considered any boundary unimportant. A fence only works when the paper beneath it is stronger, he used to tell me. I left Whitaker Ridge at 24 because he wanted me to understand how developers, banks, and counties measured land. I spent 16 years surveying rural property and appraising farms, ranches, easements, and development corridors across Texas. I learned that a pasture could look empty to one man and priceless to another. I came home when my father's health began failing. He died 2 winters later in the bedroom facing the west field, leaving behind practical instructions instead of speeches. Check the north pump every Monday. Replace the hinge on the cabin gate. Never allow anyone to move the eastern markers. Hank Bellamy waited inside the equipment shed with a flashlight in one hand and the weather radio in the other. He had worked beside my father for more than 30 years. His gray beard was wet, and his canvas coat smelled of cedar smoke, diesel, and rain. "Creek is rising upstream," he said. "We may have 3 hours before the lower crossing disappears." Lorraine planned for that. Hank glanced toward the orange sign beyond the gate. "Your father always said she would come after the road eventually." Inside the workshop, the air carried the familiar smell of old grease, damp lumber, and metal filings. A faded survey map hung above my father's drafting table. Whitaker Ridge formed a broad rectangle except for one narrow finger of land extending east toward the Silver Crest Clubhouse. Beneath the map, a brass key hung from a bent nail. I had tried it in every door, cabinet, fuel lock, and toolbox after the funeral. It fit nothing I could find. My phone rang at 6:39. Mara did not waste time with a greeting. "I found the lease entries in Dad's records," she said. Paper moved quickly on her end. Silver Crest paid annual ground rent for the clubhouse parcel until 3 years ago. I looked through the rain-streaked window toward the warm clubhouse lights. "How much?" "The amount is small. $1,200 a year. The missing payment is not the important part." Dad sent a formal default notice, then a termination notice after the cure period expired. "Do you have the lease?" "Not yet." His ledger references a locked survey drawer and a file number. My eyes moved from the map to the brass key. Lightning flashed over the eastern pasture, revealing the service lane for one white second before darkness returned. "Come to the ranch," I said. "Bring every page you found." I took the key from the nail and closed my fingers around its worn teeth. Lorraine believed that narrow strip was the road into her next development. My father had protected it like the ranch depended on it. Before Mara arrived, I intended to discover what he had known. Mara reached Whitaker Ridge at 7:14 with rain streaming off the hood of her sedan in 2 banker boxes secured beneath a plastic tarp in the back seat. By then, Lorraine had already started turning the neighborhood against me. My phone vibrated every few minutes with screenshots from the Silver Crest community page. One post showed a cow standing near my eastern fence, cropped so tightly that it looked as if the animal had wandered into someone's yard. Another claimed runoff from the ranch had contaminated the neighborhood pond. A third warned parents that loose livestock and unstable fencing created an immediate danger to children. None of the posts included dates, test results, or names. They did not need to. Fear moved faster than facts, especially when it arrived beneath an official association logo. Mara carried the first box into the workshop and set it beside my father's drafting table. Her dark hair was damp around her face, and her expression had the quiet focus she wore whenever numbers stopped behaving honestly. "Lorraine scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow at 5:30, she said. She invited residents, local media, and the county land use office. 30 minutes before the deadline. Exactly. She wants an audience when you sign. Hank turned up the weather radio as another storm warning crackled through the speaker. The creek was expected to rise more than 4 feet overnight. Mara opened her laptop and showed me a map attached to Lorraine's announcement. A bright red line crossed the eastern side of Whitaker Ridge and connected the county road to a proposed expansion behind Silver Crest. 58 new homes, 2 gated entrances, and a landscaped boulevard had been drawn across land my family still owned. The ranch was not interfering with community safety. It was standing between Lorraine and a development corridor worth millions of dollars. My phone rang at 7:32. The livestock buyer from San Angelo who had agreed to purchase 20 calves sounded apologetic. He had seen the contamination notice and could not move forward until the county cleared the property. 5 minutes later, our feed supplier called. Their driver had been stopped near the Silver Crest entrance and shown paperwork claiming the eastern lane was under temporary review. They would hold the delivery until someone confirmed access. Lorraine was not trying to win a land dispute in one day. She was trying to make operating the ranch impossible before anyone examined her evidence. At 8 o'clock, headlights swept across the workshop wall. A white sport utility vehicle stopped beyond the gate, followed by a local news van. Lorraine stepped into the rain beneath a large umbrella while Russell Crane carried a folder toward the camera crew. She spoke about environmental responsibility, responsible growth, and the burden of protecting families from an uncooperative commercial operation. Behind her, the orange warning sign shook in the wind. She pointed toward my barn as if it were the source of every problem Silver Crest had ever faced. Then she noticed me beneath the workshop awning. For the cameras, she gave me a small, courteous wave. I did not return it. Mara stood beside me, holding one of Dad's ledgers against her chest. She is cutting you off from buyers, supplies, and public support, she said. By tomorrow afternoon, she wants the county to believe the ranch is already failing. I watched Lorraine smile beneath the camera lights while rain turned the gravel around her shoes into mud. Then let her believe I am cornered, I said. My phone showed 21 hours and 58 minutes remaining. Beyond the barn, the creek had started climbing over its first marker. At 8:27, Russell Crane came through the gate carrying a clear document sleeve beneath his coat, while Lorraine remained near the news van answering questions she had written for herself. A county land use officer followed several steps behind him. His name was Aaron Keller, and the discomfort on his face told me he had not expected to become part of a neighborhood performance. Russell placed 6 pages on my father's workbench and smoothed them flat with both palms. Silver Crest submitted this development addendum earlier today, he said. It grants the association temporary control of the eastern corridor while the county reviews the expansion plan. The final page carried my father's name. Thomas Whitaker. At first glance, the signature looked convincing. The capital letters matched. The underline beneath the last name was almost right. But my father had signed cattle receipts, mineral agreements, equipment loans, and tax forms at the same kitchen table for 40 years. His pen always pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the pages beneath. This signature had no pressure, no hesitation, and no life. Mara leaned over the document without touching it. What date was this supposedly executed? October 17, 2019, Russell answered. I remembered that week clearly. My father had been in a hospital room in Fort Worth after heart surgery. His right hand shook so badly that Mara had signed his meal forms for him. Where is the original? She asked. Russell adjusted his glasses. The certified copy is sufficient for administrative review. That was not the question. Lorraine entered the workshop before he could respond. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of her cream coat, but her smile remained carefully arranged. Mr. Whitaker, this can still end without additional expense. Suspend ranch operations, clear the eastern corridor, and sign the compliance transfer tomorrow. You want the road, I said. We want responsible growth. Thunder rolled close enough to vibrate the window glass. Hank stepped inside from the pasture, breathing hard from the climb. Mud covered his boots to the ankles. The creek is 20 inches above the afternoon mark, he said. The low crossing will be gone within an hour. Lorraine heard every word. Her expression barely changed, but the pause before she answered told me the storm was doing exactly what she expected. Then you should arrange commercial transport before conditions worsen. The eastern lane is the safe route to the ridge pasture, I said. Aaron Keller looked down at the county notice in his hand. The administrative hold concerns commercial development traffic on the disputed corridor, he said carefully. It does not clearly prohibit emergency livestock movement across established private ranch access. Lorraine turned toward him. The association considers that lane part of the development corridor. The county has not verified ownership, Aaron replied. That review is pending. Russell quickly gathered the pages. Any objections can be presented at tomorrow's meeting. Mara had already photographed each one. She enlarged the signature beside a genuine document from the same year. The differences became obvious. The spacing in Thomas Whitaker was uneven. The underline had been copied from a different signature. Even the typed address used a zip code from another county. Lorraine moved toward the door. You are running out of time, Caleb. So are you, I said. Her eyes narrowed before she stepped back into the rain. When their vehicles disappeared beyond the gate, Hank shut the workshop door and turned the lock. The weather radio announced a flash flood warning for the entire county. Mara studied the two signatures on her screen. Someone assembled this from pieces of old documents, she said. I looked at the brass key beside my father's survey map, then at the narrow strip of land reaching toward the clubhouse. Then we stopped defending ourselves against their copy, I said. We find the original they are afraid we kept. We searched the workshop until 9:18, opening every drawer, cabinet, and tool chest my father had used, but the brass key fit none of them. Rain hammered the metal roof while Mara worked through the ledgers and Hank checked the creek every 10 minutes. Each time he returned, more mud covered his boots. Another 7 inches, he said after the third trip. We need the cattle moving before 10:30. The eastern service lane was still the safest path to the ridge pasture, but Lorraine had wrapped it in enough legal confusion to make every decision feel dangerous. I called Aaron Keller twice and reached his voicemail both times. The storm would not wait for a county office to clarify its own language. Mara sat beneath the old survey map, turning pages with careful hands. The ground rent payments begin in 2011, she said. Silvercrest paid $1,200 every January until 3 years ago. Then nothing. What did Dad do? 3 notices. The first demanded payment. The second warned that the cure period was running. The last entry says termination effective after 90 days. She pointed to a notation written in his narrow block letters. SD 42. Does that mean anything? I looked around the workshop. My father labeled everything, but he trusted memory more than explanations. Hank stood near the heater, staring at the drafting table. Survey drawer, he said. Number 42. There is no drawer. Not one you can see. He crossed the room and crouched beside the heavy oak table my grandfather had used before my father converted it into a repair bench. Hank ran his fingers beneath the front edge until he found a small brass plate hidden behind a strip of wood. Your father moved this table after Silvercrest started building. Told me never to lift it from the right side. I knelt beside him and inserted the key. It turned with a dry click. A shallow drawer released beneath the tabletop and slid forward on wooden runners. The smell of cedar, dust, and old paper rose into the room. Inside lay a blue cloth folder tied with faded string, 3 certified mail receipts, an original stamped survey, and a sealed envelope addressed to the Silvercrest board. Mara untied the folder. The first document was a ground lease dated March 6, 2010. Whitaker Ridge Ranch had leased 3.2 acres to Silvercrest Preserve for construction and operation of a community clubhouse. The association owned the building, but the land beneath it had never been sold. The lease prohibited using the parcel or adjoining ranch access for future residential development. Beside that clause, my father had written one sentence and added his initials. No road, easement, or expansion beyond existing community use. Mara turned to the default section. Her finger stopped halfway down the page. Caleb read this. The lease stated that failure to pay rent, followed by 90 days without cure after formal notice, allowed the landowner to terminate the agreement. Continued possession would become holdover occupancy at 10 times the annual ground rent. A separate clause gave the landowner the option to purchase the clubhouse improvements at a fixed appreciated value after an uncured default. The certified receipts proved Silvercrest had received every notice. Russell Crane had signed for the final one. Mara opened the sealed envelope last. Inside was the termination notice and a handwritten note from Dad. They will deny the lease when they need the road. Keep the originals where their new map cannot reach them. The weather radio announced that the creek had crossed flood stage upstream. Hank looked toward the pasture. We are out of time. I folded the survey and placed it inside my jacket. The same document that proved Lorraine had no right to control our service lane also showed that Silver Crest had occupied terminated leased land for 3 years. Open the eastern gate, I said. Move the herd to the ridge. Hank glanced at the county notice. You are sure? The hold applies to commercial development traffic. This is private ranch access during a flood warning. At 9:46, the gate swung open. 83 cattle moved through the rain toward higher ground, their hooves pressing deep into the wet earth. Across the pasture, every window in the clubhouse burned with warm light. Lorraine thought that building was the center of her power. My father had left proof that it was standing on ours. By 10:20, the last cattle reached the ridge pasture, and the lower field had already begun disappearing beneath muddy water. Hank closed the upper gate while rain swept across the grass in silver sheets. The herd settled behind the windbreak, restless but safe, and for a moment the three of us stood listening to the creek push through the cottonwoods below. Lorraine had expected the storm to trap me between her deadline and the county notice. Instead, the service lane she tried to claim had carried every animal out of danger. Back inside the workshop, Mara spread the lease, certified receipts, termination notice, and original survey beneath the brightest lamp. I called Dean Hollis, a land use attorney I had worked with during my surveying years. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice heavy with sleep until Mara read the holdover provision aloud. Then he became fully alert. Photograph every page, he said. Scan the seals. Preserve the envelopes, and do not tell the association what you found. Can the purchase option still be exercised? I asked. Possibly. First, I need to confirm the legal description, the termination date, and whether your father accepted any payment after default. If the lease was never reinstated, the option may still be enforceable. Mara opened another ledger. No rent was accepted after the notices. Every payment line is blank. Dean paused. That helps. Meet me at the county records office when it opens. Bring the originals in a waterproof case. Headlights moved across the workshop windows before I could answer. Lorraine's white vehicle stopped outside the gate, with Russell in the passenger seat. She stepped into the rain and raised her phone toward the open eastern lane. You violated the administrative hold, she called. I have video showing unauthorized livestock traffic through the disputed corridor. I walked to the gate but left it closed. The notice applies to commercial development traffic. Those cattle crossed established private ranch access during a flood warning. Silver Crest controls that corridor. Then bring the original agreement tomorrow. Her expression tightened. You are making this more expensive than necessary. For whom? Russell leaned toward her and said something through the open window. Lorraine lowered her phone. You will attend the emergency meeting and sign the compliance transfer. I will attend. And cooperate? I said I will attend. She studied me, looking for fear, exhaustion, or surrender. I gave her none. Finally, she smiled as if she had heard the answer she wanted. 5:30 tomorrow evening. Do not be late. When her taillights vanished through the rain, Mara looked at me across the gate. You just let her believe you are giving up. I let her believe silence means agreement. At 11:12, Dean sent a list of documents we would need. Mara began tracing the association's ground rent charges through publicly available budgets while Hank checked the ridge fence. By midnight, she found the first break. Silver Crest had continued billing homeowners for clubhouse ground rent during all 3 years. When Whitaker Ridge received nothing. The money had not vanished. It had been included in management invoices paid to Crestline Community Services, a company registered to Russell Crane's brother-in-law. Mara turned her laptop toward me. Rows of payments glowed against the dark workshop. They did not forget the lease, she said. They collected the money and hid the default. I looked at the clubhouse lights beyond the flooded pasture. Lorraine was preparing a public stage for my surrender. Dean was preparing the option notice. Mara was building the money trail. My phone showed 17 hours and 58 minutes remaining. For the first time since the orange sign went into the ground, the clock no longer felt like hers. At 8:30 the next morning, the county records office smelled like wet coats, copier toner, and coffee that had been sitting too long on a hot plate. The storm had moved east, leaving the streets bright beneath a pale Texas sky. Dean Hollis met Mara and me inside with a leather briefcase, reading glasses, and the serious expression of a man who trusted documents more than explanations. For nearly 4 hours, we compared the original ground lease against recorded deeds, tax maps, survey plats, and Silver Crest declarations. The result was clear. Whitaker Ridge still owned every inch of the 3.2 acres beneath the clubhouse. Silver Crest owned the structure only subject to the lease. My father had properly delivered the default and termination notices. The 90-day cure period had expired 3 years earlier. No later payment had been accepted, and no agreement had reinstated the lease. Dean placed the option schedule in front of me. "You cannot become the uncontested owner of the building in one afternoon," he said. "But you can formally exercise the option, fund escrow, record notice of your claim, and demand completion under the contract." "That is enough for tonight," I said. The clubhouse had cost Silver Crest more than $2 million to build. Under the depreciation formula the association had signed, the option price was less than 1/10 of that amount. At 1:20, I signed the documents through Whitaker Community Holdings, a limited liability company Dean had formed with me as its sole member. The purchase funds entered escrow. The county clerk recorded a memorandum of the exercised option and terminated lease. She did not decide ownership. She simply created a public record that Lorraine could not hide in a boardroom cabinet. By 3:40, Mara had finished tracing the missing payments. Silver Crest homeowners had been charged nearly $40,000 for ground rent and related management fees, but Whitaker Ridge had received nothing. Much of the money had passed through Crestline Community Services, the company tied to Russell's brother-in-law. Dean sent preservation notices to the HOA attorney, the association auditor, and the county investigator. At 5:24, I walked into the Silver Crest clubhouse wearing clean jeans, work boots, a denim shirt, and the same brown jacket I had worn at the gate. Every chair was occupied. Residents lined the walls, and 2 local television cameras faced the stage. Lorraine stood beneath the association seal with Russell beside her. My father's false agreement filled the projection screen behind them. She smiled when she saw me. "Mr. Whitaker has arrived to resolve this unfortunate dispute," she announced. I stopped at the table but did not sit. Lorraine spoke for 11 minutes about progress, safety, and the responsibility of one property owner to respect an entire community. Then she placed a compliance transfer in front of me and offered a silver pen. My phone showed 26 minutes remaining. "Sign here," she said quietly. I placed my father's original survey over her document. Mara connected her laptop to the projector. The false agreement disappeared, replaced by the recorded plat. A red boundary surrounded the entire clubhouse parcel. The room filled with low voices. "Silver Crest does not own the eastern corridor," I said. "It leased this land from Whitaker Ridge." Lorraine lifted her chin. "That lease expired. It terminated after your board stopped paying rent." Mara displayed the certified receipts, the termination notice, and Russell's signature confirming delivery. Then she showed the resident assessments, the unpaid ground rent, and the payments routed through Crestline Community Services. Russell reached for the microphone, but the association attorney quietly told him not to speak. Dean placed the escrow confirmation and recorded memorandum beside Lorraine's and signed transfer. "The purchase option has been formally exercised," I said. "Silver Crest may challenge the process, but it cannot pretend the lease never existed. Until the matter is resolved, the clubhouse remains in holdover occupancy at 10 times the contracted ground rent." Lorraine looked toward Russell, but he was staring at his own signature on the screen. My countdown reached 14 minutes. She had invited the cameras to record my surrender. Instead, every lens in the room was pointed at the evidence her board had spent 3 years hiding. For several seconds, nobody in the clubhouse moved. The projector hummed above us, and rainwater from the evening crowd tapped steadily from coats onto the tile near the entrance. Lorraine stood behind the table with one hand resting on the unsigned compliance transfer. Russell kept his eyes on the screen, where Mara had arranged the financial records in a simple timeline. Homeowners had been charged for ground rent every year. Whitaker Ridge had received nothing. The difference had moved through Crestline Community Services, the company connected to Russell's family. Lorraine reached for the microphone first. "These materials are incomplete and presented without proper context," she said. "The board will review them privately and respond after legal consultation." A woman in the third row stood before Lorraine could continue. Nora Caldwell had lived in Silver Crest for 14 years and once served on the finance committee until Lorraine removed her. "The proper time for review was 3 years ago," Nora said. "Why were we billed for rent that was never paid?" Voices rose around the room. Residents opened assessment statements on their phones. One man called out the exact ground rent charge from his annual invoice. Another asked why Crestline had received management payments without competitive bids. Lorraine tapped the microphone. "This meeting concerns the ranch, not unrelated accounting questions." "They are the same issue," Mara said. She changed the screen to the original lease. The unpaid rent triggered default. The uncured default terminated the lease. The termination activated holdover rent and the purchase option. These events began because the board collected money for an obligation it did not pay. Dean placed 2 proposed occupancy agreements on the table. I held up the first. Under the existing board, Silver Crest remains in holdover status at 10 times the original ground rent, exactly as the signed contract requires. Lorraine gave a short, strained laugh. "You expect these families to finance your revenge?" "No," I said. "That is why there is a second agreement." I placed it beside the first. This agreement resets rent to fair market value after the board withdraws every claim against Whitaker Ridge, removes the false development addendum, opens the financial records to an independent audit, and adopts written limits on enforcement authority. The room quieted. The homeowners will decide which future becomes possible. Lorraine's face hardened. "They cannot remove this board tonight." Nora lifted a folder from beneath her chair. "Not tonight," she said. "But we have enough verified signatures to require a special recall meeting under the bylaws." She handed the petition to the association attorney. He reviewed the certification pages, counted the signatures, and quietly confirmed that the request appeared sufficient for formal notice. Several residents then demanded that all financial records be preserved and that Lorraine and Russell lose unsupervised access until the audit began. The attorney advised immediate restrictions to protect the files. That was the moment Lorraine finally understood she no longer controlled the room. My phone vibrated in my pocket. 6 o'clock. The deadline expired while I stood beneath the clubhouse roof on land my family had never sold. No transport crew arrived at Whitaker Ridge. No county officer came to remove cattle. No one touched the barn. Instead, Aaron Keller entered through the rear doors carrying a written clarification from the Land Use Office. The Eastern Service Lane was established private ranch access, and the temporary administrative hold did not give Silver Crest authority to control emergency livestock movement or ranch operations. The development addendum had been flagged for investigation. Russell slowly closed his laptop. Lorraine looked at the cameras, the residents, and the 2 agreements lying in front of me. "You planned this," she said. I thought about my father's brass key, the hidden survey drawer, and the certified receipt bearing Russell's signature. "No," I said. "You planned the meeting. I only brought the records." The special recall meeting took place 9 days later in the same clubhouse where Lorraine had expected to watch me surrender. This time, her name had been removed from the presiding officer's seat, and the association attorney supervised every ballot. More than 80% of participating homeowners voted to remove her from the board. Russell resigned before the final count was announced, leaving his access card and office keys with the attorney. Nora Caldwell became interim president and immediately authorized an independent audit, withdrew every enforcement claim against Whitaker Ridge, and canceled the proposed eastern expansion until residents could review it openly. The county rejected the development addendum after investigators determined that my father's signature had been constructed from copied documents and submitted without valid authorization. The Eastern Service Lane was formally confirmed as private ranch access. Several months later, Lorraine's real estate license was suspended while state regulators reviewed her role in the false filing. Russell faced charges involving falsified association records and payments routed through Crestline Community Services. I did not celebrate either announcement. Justice felt less like victory than the moment a heavy machine finally stopped running. Dean completed the Clubhouse transaction after Silvercrest chose not to contest the purchase option. Whitaker Community Holdings became the legal owner of the building, and the association signed the second occupancy agreement. The ground rent returned to fair market value after the independent audit began. The board adopted written limits on enforcement authority, and every homeowner received access to quarterly financial reports. The holdover settlement covered our legal expenses, repaired the storm-damaged service lane, and created a fund to reimburse residents who had paid fines under rules that had never been properly approved. Mara reviewed the first audit line by line. Hank said it was the first time he had ever seen a counting repair offense. By spring, the stone clubhouse looked the same from the pasture, but everything inside had changed. The old Silvercrest boardroom became a public records room with glass cabinets, posted budgets, and meeting minutes available to anyone who asked. A new cedar sign above the entrance read Whitaker Community Hall. Families still held birthday parties there. Neighbors still gathered for holiday dinners. The difference was that nobody could hide the lease, the money, or the rules behind a locked door again. 1 year after Lorraine planted the orange warning sign, I stood at the eastern fence at 6 o'clock in the evening. The sky was clear, the creek moved quietly beneath the cottonwoods, and all 83 cattle grazed on the ridge. The red barn remained where my father built it. The north well still worked. Every boundary marker stood untouched. Inside the barn, I had mounted Lorraine's warning sign beneath the original survey map. Dried mud covered its lower edge, and the red lettering had begun to fade. The brass key hung beside it on the same bent nail where my father had left it. Mara joined me at the gate and looked toward the community hall, where warm light spilled across the pasture. Dad knew they would come for the road, she said. He knew paper would outlast their threats. I rested both hands on the top rail. Lorraine had arrived with cameras, deadlines, and a signature she thought nobody would question. My father had answered years earlier with a lease, a receipt, and a key. Nothing on Whitaker Ridge had moved. The cattle stayed. The barn stayed. The land stayed. The only thing forced to leave was the power that never belonged to them.